My cousin Eloy lives in the next country over, a couple of miles and a pretty boring car ride away. He's 2 years older than me, and the only reason why he doesn't live closer to me is because his mother has this stuck-up, ultra-snobbish persona in her mind who hates public schools. I mean, who doesn't? But this woman is extreme. Now, don't get me wrong. My Aunt Catherine means well. She's just super annoying and nosy. Anyway, the only reason I'm bringing them up is that a few days after Mark Markinson died, Eloy called me to let me know how glad he was that son of a bitch was dead. Mark Markinson had arrested my mom's brother, Eloy's father, multiple times for petty theft. My uncle had a bad case of sticky fingers and took great advantage of the 5-finger discount. I say had, not because he's dead, but because he stopped and now sits in an office and gets paid a ridiculous amount of money to sell things that nobody needs, but everybody wants. It's like the legal version of stealing money from the public, I suppose. Getting that call from Eloy made me remember something that he had told me multiple times before, during the summers that we spent with them when I was younger. There was a teacher at Eloy's private high school named Eleanor Ruminek. Apparently, she would sleep with her students, male and female, in exchange for higher grades in her class. She taught physics. I recall Eloy telling me about a girl in his class who was basically forced to sleep with Miss Ruminek because she had refused to give her any other form of extra credit. I had seen Eleanor Ruminek a few times, although never in person, just in Eloy's yearbooks or the front paper that arrived at his doorstep during the summer because her physics club won some sort of state competition. When I saw the picture of her with the students, the only thing I could think of was whether or not they had some sort of orgy before winning their award. When I looked up Eleanor Ruminek of Facebook, her profile was the first to show up. Her profile picture was innocent enough. Short hair pinned away from her face, smile, and a turtleneck. I don't know what I was expecting, but she looked pretty nice and normal, which I suppose the bad ones always do. I scrolled through some of her posts for a bit, and I noticed that a lot of the people she communicated with were her students. Some looked young, as if they were still in high school, while others looked to be in their 20s now. Eleanor was in her 40s, or at least I figured she was, based on the birthday she had listed on her profile. You really would not believe how easy it was to find Miss Ruminek and figure out where she would be one Saturday night. Or maybe you would. It's really rather simple to find out where people will be thanks to social media. A few searches, clicks and scrolls are all that it takes to find out that the girl who sits 5 seats away from you in your English lecture goes to the same bar every Saturday night, or in Eleanor's case, a club. It was a pretty lengthy drive, but I didn't mind, considering that the club was pretty far away from both my home and hers, which made everything slightly safer. For me, of course. I really can't say the same for Eleanor. Anyway, I drove over to the club that night. I walked in and spotted Eleanor immediately. She was sitting at the end of the bar by herself, stirring her drink with a small black straw. She was wearing a simple short black dress. I walked up and took the stool right next to hers. "I'll take a shot of tequila," I said to the young bartender. "What's with the gloves?" Eleanor asked. I looked over at her and studied her face before I replied. "My hands get severely dry in the colder months. They're a precaution," I replied. She nodded, but didn't look like she believed me. "I'm Norman," I lied, extending my hand out. She shook my hand firmly. "Norman? Like Norman Bates?" she asked. The corner of her lip turned up slightly, and she raised an eyebrow. Yeah, I guess it could be like Norman Bates, I replied, appreciating the irony. Are you a Hitchcock fan? She asked, turning her body to the side so she was facing me. I ran my finger across the rim of the shot glass in front of me. My father is. I've seen some of his work, I replied. This part was not a lie. My father was a huge film geek and had seen everything. When I was a child, he would let me watch movies with him, and he was a big fan of horror, suspense, anything of the like. But the thing is, the most believable lies are the ones with some truth behind them. Eleanor nodded as she took a sip of her drink. Is your mother's name Norma? She grinned. My mother's name was Anne. I lied again. Was? My mother's dead, I replied, not a lie. I won't bore you with all the specifics of the conversation, but having a dead mother earned me some bonus points from Miss Ruminek. After a few minutes, we had moved from the bar to the back of the club. After we had been talking for a few moments, a waitress came up to us, offering us some drinks that were on the house. I took one for me and one for Eleanor. What is this? Eleanor asked the waitress. It's a Mai Tai, she called back. Eleanor shook her head and handed it back. I'm severely allergic to citrus. After hearing that information, I looked down at my watch, 12:14 a.m. I told Eleanor that I had to go and then walked out and into the nearest drugstore and bought a bottle of citrus water and a bottle of plain water and switched the labels. I sat in my car for about an hour and a half. Then I saw Eleanor coming out, being followed by some guy. I could tell she was trying to get away, so I walked out of my car and over to help her. Once I got the guy to leave, Eleanor thanked me. I thought you had to go, she said. She was really drunk. I came back for you, I replied. I looked around to make sure the parking lot was empty. It was. Well, what do you say we go back to my place? Eleanor asked. I agreed and led her to my car. She got in, and I began driving in the direction she said. Here, you want some water? I asked, motioning towards the bottle. She picked it up and took 3 long sips of it before she froze. I pulled over off to the side of the empty back road and looked over at her. I'm allergic to citrus, she exclaimed. You need to take me to the hospital, please, she said, looking at me with huge eyes. No, I replied. She looked at me with a mixture of fear and confusion. But I'll die if you don't take me, she said. She was hyperventilating. Oh, I know, I replied. It took about 3 hours for Eleanor to die. The whole time she kept trying to get out of the car while I drove around back streets in the middle of nowhere, and stopping twice to fill up my gas tank with the extra gasoline I had purchased a few days ago. She kept shaking, trying to breathe, and continued to cry. Then she stopped. I made sure she was really dead. Before I circled around to the club, arriving from the back road that led from inside the woods, which then led up to the actual club parking lot. No one uses the roads in the woods anymore, not since the main roads were fixed and made everything more accessible. I carried her out of my car and dumped her body in the middle of the road, where I knew it would take at least 2 days for someone to find her. Then I drove home. The next morning, I spent most of the day cleaning the interior of my car, like I did every other Sunday. I made sure I wiped everything down, vacuumed the whole car, and washed off the tires. Then I washed the bottle she drank out of and threw it in my neighbor's recycling. Then I washed the clothes I had worn, got a haircut, and then came back home. Monday morning rolled around. She was on the news. Beloved teacher dies from a food allergy. I was nervous for about a week after that. This kill was stupid. There were too many potential witnesses. Too many people saw me that night. I thought for sure I would be at least questioned, but I wasn't. I'm not sure if that's because law enforcement can be rather stupid, or because I actually managed to pull it off, regardless of all things that could have gone wrong. Anyway, now there's one less predator on Earth, and that's gotta count for something, right?